Hello and welcome to Press TV's Spotlight. I'm Marzia Hashimi. Thanks so much for being with us. Well, Russia has suspended its participation in the New START treaty with the United States on Tuesday. The treaty limits the two sides' nuclear arsenals, which accounts for 90% of the world's nuclear warheads. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Moscow is not withdrawing from the treaty, but need to evaluate NATO's overall goals. Given the current conflict in Ukraine, he said it would be absurd under the current conditions to allow the U.S. to inspect its military facilities, which is part of the New START treaty. What does this all mean for Russia, for the U.S., for NATO, and the world? Stay with us as we take a look at this on this Spotlight. I'd like to welcome my guest now to the program. Christoph Hörstel, author and politician out of Berlin. And John Busnich, journalist, activist, and political analyst out of Belgrade. Well, thank you both for being with us on the Spotlight. I'd like to start this off with Christoph. What is your overall take on the announcement by President Putin about suspending Russia's participation in the New START treaty?
Three items are there on the table very obviously. This is a last warning towards the West and all Western countries that if they pursue the present course, a nuclear war cannot be excluded. That is a very clear story. There's a more than 20-year-old Russian doctrine on this situation, meaning if the much higher armed NATO will push Russia to the wall, Russia may use nuclear arms as a last consequence first. And that is a huge danger because the US have openly declared they want to press Russia to the wall. They want to make Russia a victim, losing the war and things like that. And that means we are headed for nuclear war, number one. Then comes number two, that obviously Putin is using the same rationale the West has used for the intermediate forces treaty. They stopped from Washington's side because Russia quotes Great Britain and France as nuclear powers and says we cannot do START and just, be negligent for this threat from Great Britain and France as nuclear powers. So they have to be included into the treaty somehow. And that means they have to renegotiate with the US. And the last point is the US, and I mean, Iran knows this firsthand very well, is keeping treaties only if they are just happy to do so. If they are not, they will stop keeping up their words with treaties. And that means Russia has to be very, very careful what kind of treaty they want to honor in the future, because Washington does not if they feel so.
John, your take. I mean, Russia said actually that it was actually the United States who violated the treaty already, or treaty first. What's your opinion about that? What exactly do you think they mean?
Well, there's no doubt that the United States is operating in bad faith on all of these topics, and that the United States is attempting to provoke an armed conflict. There's no doubt about it whatsoever. So I would say that a fair and neutral party would support President Putin's very clear, very legal, and very correct warning to the West that it's time to stop. Because everything that Ukraine is doing with the puppet president in Kiev is being directly ordered and commanded by the U.S. government, nothing more.
Why do you think he chose this time, John, to make this announcement?
Well, I think that we are on the beginning edge of Russia's main special military operation offensive to protect the ethnic Russians of Ukraine and to terminate the threat to the heartland of Russia from Ukrainian missiles and Ukrainian other weapons of mass destruction. Therefore, as this operation begins and starts to take the form of a complete destruction of the Zelensky regime, that would be the most likely time to see NATO directly intervene. If NATO directly intervenes in this region, Russia has the right to use every available means, and that includes nuclear weapons. Nobody should have any confusion about the situation.
What about that, Christoph? You heard what John said. Because we also saw earlier today Joe Biden, U.S. President Joe Biden, in Warsaw. It was almost like a pep rally, and basically talking about that they have no choice but to continue, but to go ahead and fight for freedom. I mean, are we just headed for an outright on head-on collision between the U.S. and Russia?
Exactly, and it's Washington that drives this very much. Russia has warned for 7 months before they had to take steps, because Kiev, by Zelensky, on February 19 last year, threatened they would not, honor the Budapest Accord anymore, which means Ukraine could start developing their own nuclear weapons. And that was the key starting point, according to the Russian sources, very clearly so. And of course, we are in a very dangerous situation, because this is Europe. Washington is very far away. They love to watch us go down, as they are so sweetly happy that Ukraine is going down right now.
Okay, well, John, the treaty actually provides for 18 on-site inspections per year for the U.S. Russian inspection teams. What does it mean now when we talk about, because President Putin said he's not talking about totally leaving it, but it's suspended. What exactly does that mean?
Well, I guess the best way to describe this is that the primary function at this time of any U.S. inspections of Russian nuclear facilities would be for the purposes of targeting those facilities. And I give you the analogy here. During the NATO war in Kosovo, prior to initiating the war and attacking Serbia to seize Kosovo, the United States infiltrated the inspection services of the UN and the UN force in Kosovo for the specific purposes of locating the targeting for aerial bombardment and rocket attacks. So this is not some speculation. This is a proven fact with a clear precedent in the very recent past.
Well, Christoph, Russia has said that though it's suspending the New START treaty, it will still abide by the qualitative limitations of the treaty. Your analysis of this, and does that sound like a power which is actually seeking to expand the conflict, or tell me your take on this?
No, of course, Russia has never tried, not in one single step, to expand any conflict. They are not trying to expand their territory. They are not trying to, run over Ukraine, Poland, and then enter Germany, as Washington accuses them to do. No, this is typically NATO style. And again, as always, Washington and NATO accuse somebody else of exactly those feats which they do themselves. So this is the adverse order of things which we are looking into here. We know that Germany, on behalf of Washington, is violating the Non-Proliferation Act, nuclear non-proliferation. That is because we share, nuclear weapons on our territory in Büchel in Western Germany, and we fly bombers capable of carrying nuclear bombs. And this is forbidden according to this pact. And of course, we are doing it. And now, later, dozens of years later than NATO, Russia has started the same kind of undertaking with Belarus, with White Russia. And that is interesting that Putin, when that started, said, this was not our idea. Somebody else did it first. And that is what we see here. Always, Russia takes the second step after, sometimes even very long after. Washington has started the first. That's what we are seeing here again. And that's a caution clause that Putin declared here, that he says, well, look what you can lose if you continue, Washington, your belligerent course. And again, I'm quite sure, as in the last 1.5 years, Washington will try its level best to push NATO not to listen to Moscow, not to listen to the warnings, because that would stop the belligerent course and path of Washington, and Washington wants war in Europe. That's the bad point.
Well, John, Christoph, sorry, let me interrupt you there, because you said they basically, Washington wants to push NATO further in this. You're sitting in Germany. It's a so-called sovereign nation anyway. Do the Europeans not get what is going on, that actually they're the ones that are going to lose big time, much bigger probably than the Americans? Your take on that side of it.
Okay, it's very clear that we are made to lose here. I said in the past, Germany is the guaranteed loser of the next war against Russia. And be careful about this. We signed the 2+4 treaty. Yeah? We had the NATO-Russia Act, and we violated both of them very thoroughly. Russia would have the legal right to invade Germany on a very short red telephone notice to Washington, Paris, and London, saying, look, guys, we are coming. That's self-defense. That's allowed. So this is the situation here. Russia is not coming because they are not aggressive. The aggression sits solely and exclusively with Washington, and the Europeans know it, but they are so corrupt, they are more afraid of their Washingtonian leaders than of their own voters and populations. That's the dirty fact here.
Wow, absolutely amazing. Well, John, why do you think that NATO, led by the United States, has been so aggressive in approaching Russian borders, even prior to the war with Ukraine, while knowing that Moscow has a powerful nuclear arsenal?
Well, let me begin by saying I support and agree with every word of your other guest here today. The best way to get a grip on this situation is not to view NATO as a defensive alliance. NATO is, like the rest of the American structures, a money-making business. The purpose of NATO is to consistently and without any interruption drive the American economy by forcing the upgrading and expansion of military production by the military-industrial complex, which is the profit-making element of America. If there is no war anywhere, and if the military-industrial complex is not generating profits, there will be mass unemployment in the United States, economic collapse, and there will be a public question as to what is the purpose of our military alliance that costs us trillions of dollars to maintain. Those are the questions that America is trying to avoid. And we have to remember that Joseph Biden is a man who has never had a military uniform on his back. He has zero military experience. For him, this is a money issue and nothing more. They need to make money, and they only make it by killing people around the world.
Well, John, what you're saying, okay, but again, I have to come back in with the European factor. You're talking about the military-industrial complex. You're talking about keeping the American war machine running. And what about the Europeans in the middle of this? They are the ones. Are they also profiting, or are they willing, these leaders, to sacrifice their people to that extent? As our guest in Berlin said, Christoph said, it's because of the way, how much they fear Washington. Do you agree? Is it the fear factor or something else with the Europeans to go along with this?
It's a combination. The politicians in most of the leading Western European states are people who have been elected at the behest of Washington. The United States has an intelligence service that is in every NATO country. They select the candidates, they organize the financing of the candidates, and they blackmail the candidates with the spying information that they developed about them over their entire lifetimes. These are puppet rulers. There have not been any independent leaders in Western Europe since Charles de Gaulle. That was the last time a European leader said anything to NATO to the degree that we are not going to do what you order us to do. So we've got a cohort of vassal leaders whose primary reason for being in power is to serve their master. Their master is not their domestic population. Their master is Washington. And in fact, they fear their domestic population because they have no legitimacy, but they fear Washington more because the party that put them into power could take them out of power far faster than the people.
Well, Christoph, with what John has just said, is there any hope that the people of Europe can actually rise up and be able to change the status quo? Or your assessment of that side?
Yeah, I totally agree with John here. Our top candidates, as in all of the NATO countries, are chosen by their blackmailability. If they have committed anything in their former life before taking high office, which makes them a very, happy victim of Washington's blackmail, they are chosen to make the big career. This is the way it works here. And we know this for the German chancellor, and we know this on many sides. We know this by the careers. So what's the opposition hope here? It's next to zero. In Germany, the opposition is completely subverted by CIA and by the forces and the Atlantic Bridge and all these, bodies we have here in Germany, which are part of Washington's colonial system. So the opposition right now in Germany is unable to answer the question, what are your 5 top demands? I'm trying to push this into Germany since months. It is very hard. The other side has the money. The other side has the power. The other side has the surveillance system. That means the CIA knows exactly who is doing what, who is thinking what in the German opposition. And then they send their agents. And I'm seeing all these bloody CIA agents flood through the German opposition. And you know what this reminds me of? Of the German resistance against Adolf Hitler. There was one man sitting in Switzerland. He was the head of the later CIA. He had contacts to all the anti-Hitler resistance groups. They trusted the Americans. And they did very wrong to do that, because from there it was stopped. They stopped so many actions against Hitler. America did that. They needed Germany completely on the ground. And this goal remains the same, and it is now valid for all of Europe. They want us on the ground. We are competence, we are some kind of competition to them, so they want us down. And they want us under the rule of Washington. So this is the tool they use, that they have, in fact, subverted the whole opposition here. And that means that hope is very faint. I'm working my heart out for that. Many people do this with me, apart from me, but we are so weak. We must, very openly confess that this is literally nearly impossible.
Well, John, how dangerous do you see this current situation? And do you see the war between Ukraine and Russia getting worse and deteriorating, and having the U.S. and Russia basically go direct on this?
Well, first of all, the situation is extremely dangerous. Not just because there's a senile man in office in Washington, but because he is surrounded by the same kind of warmongers as advisors who led the neocons around the Republicans. For these people, the attack on Russia and the pressure on Russia is a resource hunt to steal the wealth of Russia, the world's largest country, and to pivot via Russia to destroy China. For these people, once again, it's a matter of money and resources. And the U.S. president is normally the man who is supposed to try and keep this under control. This is the opposite situation today. Joseph Biden is literally a puppet on a string of the military-industrial complex, which put him in power because the military-industrial complex, after suffering public outcry during the Vietnam War, made their #1 priority the buying up of the media. That means that all the news about this conflict, all of the opinions that might be against war, are being censored out of the media, and the American public is only hearing a single mantra. And the mantra is, Russia is evil, China is evil, we've got to destroy them. And even a sensible person, when subjected to 24/7 brainwashing, starts to wonder whether the message is true. And as soon as the American people get to the point where they believe the message that war is inevitable, we're going to see this thing really get serious. As for your other question about the war in Ukraine, I don't know how you would define the war in Ukraine as being worse or better, but Russia is winning the battle on the ground against the Ukrainian armed forces hands down. It is a rout. And as a result of that, we're seeing crisis management in the Western European countries, which have put all their stakes behind their puppet, Zelensky.
And on that note, I appreciate you both being with me. Very interesting discussion. Out of Berlin, Christoph Hörstel, author, and politician. Out of Belgrade, John Bosnich, journalist, activist, and political analyst. Appreciate you being with me. And as always, viewers, pleasure having you with us for another Spotlight. I'm Marzia Hashimi, signing out for myself and all the crew right here in Tehran. Thanks and goodbye.